change to any high degree. I'm not saying it's completely unaffected, but it's not a lot. The primary driver for this food production is demand. More people, or richer people, demand more food. And when the demand is there, the food is produced. And the efficiency or cost of food production has increased a lot, and climate change may have a minor role here, CO2 fertilization, but it's mainly technology. The main driver for this cost reduction is technology. And again, climate change impacts are marginal compared to the technological development. And future food will be highly affordable, much higher quality for all people, even the 10+ billion we will become in 50 years. Here's the big picture. That's the value of the total food production of the world. In 1960 it was 1 trillion, and now it's 4 trillion. If you look at it as part of the global gross domestic product, it's less now, because we have been so efficient in increasing our economies that food doesn't play as big a role as it did in former days. Actually, if you have subsistence agriculture, then all hours in the day is used for just producing the food you need to survive. Now we're talking about one Danish farmer can make food for 150 people. And then also the meat, of course, is increasing a lot. Some people don't like it. I do, because meat is healthy and tastes good. And then change in cereal production has changed both. The production has increased rapidly and the yield has increased, and it increases more than the amount of people. And my specialty is fisheries and aquaculture. And we now have a situation where the total value of fisheries and aquaculture is about 0.5 trillion USD. And the aquaculture is 2/3 of that. It's not so big as the animal farming and land-based farming, but it's becoming bigger and bigger. It's growing faster. Not the fisheries, they are more or less stagnant. But the mariculture and aquaculture is growing faster than the land-based production. And I have to say that this situation is very nice. And I also have to say that if there are some people who starve, has nothing to do at all with production capacity. It's a question of bad governance. Corrupt dictators which buy president palaces and helicopters, war helicopters for the money instead of feeding the people. It's very, very cheap to feed people. Every country can do that if they want to do it. We have a lot of false prophets, like I mentioned earlier, and other guys who are saying that next year it will go bad, but it hasn't happened until now. So we go on. There are still too many people who don't get enough food, but as I mentioned, it's caused by bad governance. And what we see is also that the major nutrition problem now is obesity, and it's getting worse and worse actually. And maybe we can solve it. We have a well-known Danish company called Novo who is trying their best and earning lots of money by doing it. And of course, when we're now talking about food, we know that food is something we need. We can't do without food. It means that if you talk about staple foods like the basics, people have to buy it, because and so the prices doesn't mean a lot. For luxury foods like organic strawberries and other things, that prices means something. So again, the primary driver for this thing is demand. We are getting more and more people, it now looks that the UN's central forecast are actually beginning to decline at the end of the century. I don't think that's a good thing, but it may be what's happened. And of course, the global gross domestic product is just increasing, and everybody are getting much richer and can afford much more. And if we look at the high quality food, and meat is a high quality food from any way you look at it. It's nourishing, healthy, and tastes good. And there is a direct relationship between the GDP per capita and the amount of meat we eat. We look at from the fish side, FAO has calculated that we are increasing from approximately 10 now to 20 kilo per person per year in the world. It will probably go up to maybe 40 or something. And actually, as I am a fish farmer, I actually hope that we will take market from the beef and the pigs. But that is for the people to decide. Norwegians will hope the same, I think, because they're making a lot of fish. Very well done. And again, we have seen that we have increasing efficiency, better yields. You can see on the right, the crop yields for all crops are increasing more or less steadily without any visible impacts from other factors. If we look at the wheat yields of the world, we can see the Danish curve is the upper curve here. The middle curve is the European community, the European Union, and the yellow curve is the world. And also increase. But it also shows you that if everybody were as efficient as an ordinary Danish farmer, then we could produce all the wheat we need with half the area. And you don't need to do any special technological development. You just need to do the right thing. There's an interesting thing about this. This is the variation. You can see that the Danish curve is more variable than the EU curve, which is more variable than the world curve. And it's simply because we have an international trade system which makes it so that at some places there are bad years with agriculture, but other places there are good years. And then we trade with each other, and so the situation gets equalized or harmonized. And if you look at the real prices for food, they are more or less stagnant for many years. And if we look at the very long term, we have the wheat prices on the right curve, and you can see there has been a tremendous decrease in prices. And I think that actually will continue for stable foods. On the other hand, we will probably demand more high quality food, which is more costly. Actually, food is becoming more and more entertainment product. We don't need the food to survive, but we really like it for entertainment. I hope you give a good dinner tonight, because I have really sharpened your appetite now. So one of the things is that we human beings, we can do much better than nature when growing crops. Nature is barren, that it's too wet or too dry, or doesn't have enough nutrients. One of the reasons we can grow so high amounts of crops is that we have increased the nitrogen circulation of the world a lot. It has some issues with eutrophication, but it's still what we are doing. Haber-Bosch and the chemical engineers, isn't it right, Søren? We are the reason that you are all alive. So think about that. And again, we go from slash and burn agriculture, where we grow less than 1 ton per hectare. And actually, in Africa, they only do 1 to 2 tons per hectare. And it's using back-breaking labor because they can't afford to buy the fertilizer and the pesticides they need to make really good crops. Many Danish farmers have been working in Africa, and every time they go and do something, they make much better results, and then a dictator puts them in prison or throws them out. But that's what happens. So not very many Danish farmers goes to Africa anymore. If we look at the global average, it's 4 tons. A good modern farmer can do 10. The best corn farmers in Iowa can do 30. And if we do GMO crops with tubers and seaweed and so on, then we can go to 100. And then for a bit of science fiction, if we actually have enough energy, we can grow plants in towers, and then we can do 1,000 tons per hectare. There's one exception for all this, and that's of course poverty. If people cannot afford to buy the food, then the farmers cannot afford to grow them. So the real problem for food production and nutrition is poverty. And that's one of the real bad things with the net zero, foolish net zero idea, to prevent poor Africans for using the way we got rich by using coal, oil and gas. That's criminal to my mind. Okay, let's look at some of the proven technologies. Fertilizer, we have talked about that. We have mechanizations, of course. We don't have to go like the African woman and take the weed out by hand. We use pesticides. I would like to remind you of Thomas Babington Macaulay, who said, "On what principle is it that with nothing but improvement behind us, we are to expect nothing but deterioration before us?" Yeah, it's actually a strange, but I know we are all a little bit pessimistic, so something bad may happen. So I accept the notion, but I'm just saying that empirical studies show something else. What can we expect if we increase the temperature? Actually, we can in the start expect higher yields, but there is a limit for all crops. If you come over a certain value of temperature, then the production or yield will start declining. But I have done some calculations using real numbers and adaptation, and you can see here that on the right that we can increase the global temperature with up to 6 degrees before we get a decline in yield from temperature. And that's without adaptation. But anyway, that's what we're talking about, whereas the IPCC, they have other ideas. Of course, there are other impacts like water. Too much water is bad for plants, and particularly too little. So we shouldn't grow crops at places where there's no water. I know the Saudi Arabians and Qatar and other guys, they are trying to grow wheat in greenhouses in deserts. And it doesn't make any sense at all, because it costs at least 10 times as much if you grow it on. So what they should do is just keep trading their oil with our wheat, and that would be it. Precipitation is increasing. We know that all over the world, but unfortunately, according to IPCC, it don't look like we will have increased flooding. Holland is one of the most efficient agricultural countries in the world, 2/3 below sea surface, but they still grow a lot of farm products. They have also their problems with crazy nutrient reduction schemes from EU, but I hope the Dutch will fight it off. Then we have the CO2 coalition, who have done some calculations on the advantages of increased CO2 in the atmosphere. They're saying that from 15 to 30% of this major increase we have seen in yields is caused by CO2 fertilization. I don't agree. I think it's too high. And we all like to make a point The climate alarmists want to make the food production go away, and the CO2 people, they want it to have a higher impact than it has. But anyway, it's certainly quite likely that the CO2 increase has been better for plant production. It gives better nutrient utilization efficiency, and also the plants with high CO2 can better keep themselves wet, keeps the humidity of the plant, and gives better stress resilience. There are somebody saying that this increase in plant production makes the plants a bit more less nutritious, but it may well be, but it still increases the total amount of protein grown on an area of land, and that's what really counts. And one of the places where climate has really damaged food production, that's the great biofuel scandal. The idea that we should use good cropland for growing maize to convert into bioethanol is a perverse idea, and it has increased the food costs and killed a lot of people who shouldn't have been killed. It's just as crazy as what Søren said, to burn trees to conserve trees. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I can give you an example where the food production has gone wildly down, and that's Venezuela. They got this guy Chavez for 25 years or 20 years ago, and from that point on, the Venezuelan plant production has more than halved. And it's not because of climate change. It's simply bad governance. And the amount of malnourished children in Venezuela has also increased a lot. You all Swedes know this climate fugitive problem you had in the 1860s, where a lot of people in Sweden were starving because of a drought or whatever. And many people died. We had a similar drought in Denmark in 2018. Not one people died, not one people were malnourished, not one person fled the country for that, because we had such a huge resilience because of using fossil fuels that we could easily cope with even an 18 production. Less production of wheat in Denmark. And actually, the wheat production, even if 18% less, was still much higher than for 20 years ago. So I want to come up with some interesting future ideas, and will just give you some reservations. We human beings can fumble the ball against stupidity. Even the gods contend in vain. And this can happen. Actually, it happens all the time, but unfortunately, we are still resilient enough, so it doesn't really cost us much. But that's a possibility. And very nicely, we don't need to be perfect to do the job. If we needed to be perfect, then we would fail. We can actually, you've seen the last 100 years, we have 2 world wars, 1/3 of the globe in communistic dictatorship and so on. And still, we have come out with very good numbers for the total population of the world. So, what I will state is that we will get affordable food for all with a steadily lower impact on the climate and environment. And what is needed is decoupling. By using technology, we can decouple the increase in production from the impact on the surroundings. We see it here from the carbon emissions, that they have now we produce more and more value for each ton of carbon we discharge to the atmosphere. And a fantastic example is the nitrogen efficiency of Danish agriculture, which has increased a lot from 1980 to now. It's 6 times as efficient, measured in the way looking at the value that the production gives us and the amount of nitrogen lost to the environment. That's a fantastic. It should be celebrated all over in Denmark. It's not, unfortunately, because many city people don't know where food comes from, so they don't appreciate this fantastic thing. So what can we do? We can do ocean farming, precision agriculture, animal cell culture, food production in space, and food towers, and probably many more things. Oceans, of course, we have unlimited space on the oceans. And as water is the main limiting factor for food production, it goes without saying that if you produce food in the oceans, there's no lack of water. We could probably get the nutrients from below the sea surface. If it's feasible or not, depends, but it's there. There's a lot of nutrients below in the bottom waters of the oceans. And there's also, for the tropical oceans, very small variations in temperature, salinity, and everything. So it will be a stable environment to grow food. And we have even ocean currents, which like rivers in the sea, which can flush through the sea cages and make everything work.
What kind of food do you produce?
Yeah, I'm talking about the long-term visions. Then you have to grow seaweed and shellfish and fish, particularly seaweed, because the background for producing terrestrial animals is of course the plants, because they need something to eat, and same thing goes for the fish. But it would be fish that would be the economic factor that would change. I mean, Norway is producing about 1.5 million tons of salmon each year, and to a value about 100 million Norwegian kroner, I think. 100 billion Norwegian kroner, something like that. And that will attract the other investment for the seaweed and the mussels. And Holland is doing a lot of mussel farming, not on the oceans, but in other more practical ways. I want to add here the insect-eating craze. Insects are actually, or I say fish are actually as efficient as insects, because they're cold-blooded animals and they don't need a lot of energy for making them warm. But what would you really prefer if you wanted to have a dish? Something like mealworm pâté or a smoked trout? I don't think there's any real competition. But it's still, people want us, some people want us to eat insects. Then we have the precision agriculture. I'm not going into any details, but saying that we can foresee with robots and artificial intelligence that we can take care of each individual plant, give it exactly the amount of pesticides if it's needed, exactly the amount of nutrients, so we make lots less impact and have much higher growth. And it's already happening. I mean, every big Danish farmer has a robot, computer-controlled machines for sowing and harvesting. So it's well known. But it will increase rapidly in these years with the explosion of artificial intelligence. Then, of course, we could have pigs in space. I mean, the fantastic thing about space is that the sun always shines, which it doesn't do on the Earth, only half of the day. So we could actually grow crops in space, and I think it could happen, not necessarily, but it could happen. At least if we want to colonize space, we have to do it. Anyway, but this is something which could be done, and it's much, much easier to take something from space and put it down onto the Earth than the opposite. It doesn't cost any energy to let it fall down. So that's something to think about. And then we could have a fish or beef fillet ad infinitum by animal cell culture. I think personally it will happen, but it will take lots of time. And I have a small anecdote here. I got a press release from a company who wanted to make foie gras using animal cell culture. That's quite an interesting proposal, because foie gras is very, very expensive, and it's not very nice from a welfare point of view for the animal. So I asked them a few questions. I said, how does it taste, and how much does it cost? I got back an answer about some chefs have eaten it and thinks it tastes good, and about the pricing, it's a little bit expensive now. I asked again, which chefs could I get a recommendation? And I got no answer. So it's 10, maybe 10 to 20 years too far, too early. But I think it will eventually happen. It's not so easy as people think. It's right that you get rid of all the bones and all the things you can't eat. But on the other hand, you have to have a very, very clean environment. And it's very costly to supply the nutrient solutions you need for that. But it could come, and probably will come. And of course, we hear a lot about urban farming, and one company after the others is trying to grow vegetables in the cities. But they all forget a very simple thing. A plant needs light to grow. We all know that. And that plant is actually a very, very good solar panel, because it uses solar energy and it stores the result. So we don't have the battery problem or fluctuation problem. So if we should do this, and I think we will eventually do it, then we need lots of cheap power, which we can use for lighting the plants. Then we can do this kind of production, and I have calculated that on just say 1,000 square kilometers, you can grow all the plants you need in the world in this way. It's not today, not in 10 years or 50 years, maybe in 100, 200 years. Yes?
How would you get enough carbon dioxide to produce so many plants?
But we do it already. We do it already. I mean, we are producing the. You are right that there would be. You are right that there will be a transport problem. And I don't think it should be in one place. If we do it in many places, then you can just get from the air. And actually, all the people who are trying to make smart instruments which can take carbon dioxide out of the air, they should think about a plant. It has been doing that for the last couple of billion years, so why don't you use that? So, okay, let me finish with this. A sane world will never run out of food. Look at the word sane, that's very important. But we have more or less unlimited production capacity. Climate change will not mean a lot. We can move around, we will use less and less area, and we can move to good places. If some places get bad for food production, all impacts of farming will steadily decrease to a very low value. Now I don't know if there is a sound on this thing. Let's see if there is.
Maybe some questions.
Farming's great burden shall lessen each year, as science brings promise and yields without peer. For food in abundance from earth and blue tide, a sane world shall always keep hunger denied. By land and by sea, we'll harvest with glee unlimited fields, where our bounty runs free. The climate may shift, but wise hands shall steer. We move where we must, no reason for fear.
Ja, det var i og for sig min frue. It was my wife as a young person, which I got an artificial intelligence to make 2 verses in Kipling style, and then she was the actor. Yeah. Okay, please.
Okay. There's time for one question.
Oh, okay. Yes, sure.
We have to have some time to go up and change to smoking.
Yeah.
I've been feeling that some of the natural people are worried about natural biological diversity. Are you afraid of that?
I'm concerned, but I could say several things. The real bad impact on natural biodiversity happened for more than 10 to 20,000 years ago when the hunter-gatherers killed all the big animals. And why there's still forest in the world and whales also is because of carbon, because of coal, gas and oil, because that has saved a lot of trees and also saved the whales. And this high intensity, high yield agriculture is exactly what nature needs, because all the areas we now don't have to use anymore for farming, we can now use for nature. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we have